Hey folks, welcome to Eddie the Thinker. My name is Aditya, aka Eddie, and I am in the beautiful northeast of India. Check this out. Alright, for a channel named Eddie the Thinker, I haven't done much thinking really. I've only presented scientific studies so far. Well, that changes today. In this episode, I hope to conclude the Conformity series. But first, of course, the first question is why bother? Why would I make a series on conformity? Well, the answer is because we depend on other people for survival. What do you do when you are in a novel situation, a situation where you don't know what to do? You look around, you observe other people, and then you copy their behavior. In fact, that's how children learn too, although better known as observational learning. Observational learning can be defined as the learning that results from observing the behavior of others. In fact, we have specialized brain cells called mirror neurons. These neurons were discovered in monkeys, but yes, we humans have got it too. These mirror neurons not only activate when a person performs an action, but they also activate when they observe another person doing the same action. Now, although more research is required to establish a connection between the mirror neurons and observational learning, it is quite fascinating to know that there are cells in our brain that actually allow for observational learning, and in turn might possibly play a role in conformity. I started this series on a personal story on how I got my first smartphone. Long story short, I caved into social pressure and I got my first smartphone running on the Android OS. I'm sure many of you can relate to this story. You can actually even interchange smartphone with, say, a car, a house, job, even career. Here in India, there's a belief that there are five noble professions: doctor, engineer, lawyer, teacher, and accountant. And students after a certain age are pressured to conform and select one of these five noble professions as their career. Some of them do well. They select one of these five, they're able to get a job, and they're doing okay. While others, well, they don't cope too well. They adapt a lot of bad behavior, and in extreme cases, they resort to suicide. So the real question here is conforming a good thing? Well, I explore that question in these videos. This video on the line judgment task, which was part of Ash's conformity studies, showed us that people would rather fit in even when they knew the answer and the other members of the group were unknown. Let's take a look at another video. This is also part of the Ash's conformity studies. Now, I'm sure we have all used the elevator at some point in our lives, and we usually look front facing the doors. This makes it easy to exit the elevator, and if somebody is joining or if somebody is bringing in a suitcase or something else, we get the visual cues, and so we move to accommodate them. Turning around, it just makes no sense. Yet people do it. Now, the only reason why they're doing it is they don't want to look different. They're just trying to fit in. They probably fear being bullied for not conforming. The next video on the bystander effect was more of an emergency broadcast, if you will. I initially intended on releasing the Milgram's experiment on obedience, but in light of the incident in Philadelphia, where a woman was sexually assaulted in public on a train, and yet nobody came forward to help, I decided to release this video instead. This too is a form of conformity. The bystanders who witnessed the assault would have looked around for cues, and seeing that nobody else is taking any action would have assumed that all is okay. This is actually quite dangerous. I mean, I've heard of safety in numbers, but the truth is, when you are in trouble and there's a group in front of you, you're less likely to get the help. Unfortunately, this is not the first incident of its kind, and it's certainly not the last. Unless we spread the word about the bystander effect and let people be aware of this aspect of human behavior. Now, in the second to last video, we explore Milgram's experiments on obedience, which actually tries to understand conformity motivated out of submission to authority or a fear of punishment. Now, thankfully, nobody was actually electrocuted in that experiment, but it is easy to look back now and say, gee, I would never harm an innocent soul without condoning the acts of the Nazis. Let's just do a quick thought experiment where place yourself in the shoes of a Nazi soldier who's told to torture those innocent people. You probably have bills to pay. You probably have a family that's waiting for you to bring the paycheck so you can buy groceries and, live their life. You probably want to show people that you are worth something. Maybe you were bullied all your life, and this uniform as a soldier means you get a little bit of respect around town. Would you trade all of this just because you say, well, I'm not going to harm them? What if the senior soldiers punishes you by firing you? And what are you going to tell your family when you get home? That you lost your job? I don't think they would be too happy about that. What if there are other consequences within the military for insubordination? I mean, you got to think about all this. So the poor soldier would have gone through with it, even though he was not happy about it, just out of submission to authority or fear of punishment. Now, putting it all together, considering everything we have learned thus far in this series, let's go back to the question I asked in the beginning. Why bother? Why create a series on conformity? Well, for one, I wanted to expose this aspect of human behavior. Remember what I told you in the bystander effect episode? Simply being aware of the barriers to helping people in an emergency can increase the person's chances of overcoming those barriers. Now, I'm going to apply that to conformity in general. Simply being aware of it should help you overcome it. Think of what we are learning as blind spots in human behavior. Now, if you're a driver, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you never knew about the blind spots, let's say you never knew what the blind spots were, most of the time you try to change lanes, you're going to end up ramming somebody. The saddest part is some of these topics have been researched and studied for decades. I mean, you can find research going back to the 60s and 70s. And yet, even today, we read about incidents like this. This means that the blind spots have been identified, but they are not properly communicated to the people. So now that you're aware of the blind spots, you're going to be more careful. You're going to do your shoulder checks before you change your lane. Using the same analogy, your two shoulder checks are stand up and stand out. Now, going back to the example of the assault on board the train in Philadelphia, if you were one of those bystanders, stand up. Now, with your knowledge of the bystander effect, you know that when there's a large group of bystanders, that poor woman is less likely to be helped. So you stand up, call the police, push the emergency button or pull the chain to stop the train. Do what you can to help the person. Another reason why I created this series is because I want you to stand out. Now, I remember going back to the days when the selfie camera was slowly picking up steam. There was a trend, at least here in India, where people would stand dangerously close to railway tracks, back facing the train, and they would take a selfie of them against a high-speed train approaching them. Many people were killed. I mean, do you really want to conform to that? Now, going back to the Ash's line judgment task, if you know the answer, or if I can expand that to, if you know the right way to behave, stick to it. There's no need to conform to the people around you. You know the right answer, you know the right way to behave. Stand out. Just do what you know best. The funny thing is, even religion has taught us to do what is right. Even when no one is looking, do what is right, because God's watching. Right? And you also have to stand up for the truth, no matter what. Even if you're the only one standing up for it, do it. I think it's time we start practicing what we preach. And with that, I conclude this series on conformity. Now, does that mean I have told you everything there is to learn about conformity? No. This is a brief summary, an introduction to conformity, if you will. This does not mean that I will never post another video on conformity. Well, yes, if there is research being done and we have something that's cutting edge and fascinating, I will definitely make a video on that. Well, that's a wrap from my side. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know in the comment section below, or you can simply hit the like button. Please share this video. As I mentioned, we have to ensure people are aware of these blind spots in our behavior. Even if you're familiar with conformity and all the experiments I've described, please share it anyway. Maybe there is someone in your friends list who probably is not familiar with all this. I'll be back soon with a new series, so if you haven't done so, do consider subscribing. Well, until my next video, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you soon.